I will have a look now at section 2 of the template. Are you hearing me? Yeah? Okay. Section 2 of the analysis. Okay, so here basically what we need to bear in mind is context analysis and risks and assumptions. You know, this is back to the argument that action documents aren't joining up the dots. So in other words, you know, risks and assumptions that come out in your context analysis should be linked to your risk and assumptions. This is where they come from, but this was not always or rarely the case in the analyzed action document. So risks referred to in other sections of the document, as I just said in the context section, not being picked up here. And, you know, risks are sometimes, they're sort of confused with the problematic that the action is actually designed to tackle. You can see that in the Y example that was sent to you. It's more a listing of the problems that this action is supposed to be dealing with. So sort of a not clear understanding of actually what constitutes a risk and at the same time what constitutes an assumption. In assumptions, you sort of get a lot of this, you know, willingness of partner government or commitment of, you know, and all of these issues have already or should already have been addressed in your stakeholder analysis. So just not a clear understanding of the type of information that we're looking for here in section 2, risks and assumptions. Let's look a little bit more in detail at what was going on here. So look, these are quite a lot of the action documents analyzed, what's that, about 16 of them. So major risks that were identified elsewhere in the document are not being reported on here. Then this comes, you can't read the rest of it, there's very limited identification of the internal risks. So everything is external. So it's, you know, risk of political instability, risk of climatic sort of incidents, etc. It's all very externalized. There's no real analysis of internal risks. This one here, I would have thought it would have been higher actually. No triggers identified. You will see in the instructions, not only are risks, not only are you asked to identify potential risks, you're also asked, or the authors are asked to identify potential triggers for those risks, and I personally didn't come across any case where those triggers were identified. So identified risks are in fact weaknesses. We've just discussed that. They're weaknesses that the action is going to tackle, or they're referring to stakeholder commitment, etc. And then another problem that we found with the whole issue of risk is they're not actually risks, they're related to, you know, poor planning or management, you know, so they're well within the control of the action, etc. So in summary, there seems to be not a very clear understanding of the type of information that is required in this section. Okay, I've now come to lessons learned. So this is section 3. I've been talking for quite a bit of time, so maybe I'll let somebody else have a chance. So any questions out there, guys? I'll switch off. Okay.
Okay, let me take the controls here. So first there was Tony that had a comment. Tony, do you want to actually say something about what you've just mentioned in the chat box? If you want to, you can hit the talk button.
Hi.
Hello.
Can everybody hear me? Hello?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Yeah,
You have to maybe talk a little louder.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you. No, the point that Karen makes of overlap between sections is clear. Maybe it's in part because the instructions are to some extent also overlapping with the subsections. And I give the example of, if under context, where I think under the was it 1.1.2, one's supposed to do the public policy analysis on the issue of credibility of the policy. The issue of concern was that there's not adequate attention to institutional capacity and the ability to implement existing policies or proposed policies. Now, in a sense, to answer that issue of institutional capacity, in a way very similar to doing a stakeholder analysis. If we understand stakeholders both as individual but also as organizations, one is effectively assessing who matters, what are their capabilities, etc., etc. And that's something that one really needs to do to address the issue of credibility under the PPA subsection. But then it's asked again in the subsequent section 1.1.3, where one does a stakeholder analysis. So there's a risk there. If one addresses 1.1.2 properly and thoroughly under the PPA, that one does, in a sense, a stakeholder analysis already at that stage. Yet then there is a separate subsection under stakeholder analysis. So maybe that's just an example where one needs to be a bit clearer on what information is sought, and if there really is a distinction between the kind of assessment that one might do in one subsection and then in another. So that's the main point.
Thank you. Thank you, Tony. Karen, did you want to say something?
Okay, yes, I can. Hi, Tony. Yes, thanks for that. I totally agree with you. What's happening here is, yes, there is the potential to encourage a certain degree of overlap, but with regard to that particular point, it is interesting that when you go to the stakeholder analysis, I mean, it's pretty nuanced. I agree, it could perhaps be a bit clearer. They do say, for action supporting a partner's policy, provide a brief description of the stakeholders outside the government sphere. Okay, so we've already moved beyond the government who has supposedly been assessed in the preceding section, which have not been analyzed in the public policy assessment. So there it is. It is basically you have to do some form of analysis of, your government actors. You're particularly looking, as you said, institutional capacities. You're also looking at sector coordination mechanisms. So I totally agree. There is the guidelines are sort of suggesting that governmental entities are analysed within, to a certain degree, the PPA section, certain elements of it, and then 1.2, the stakeholder analysis, is a little bit more focused on other actors and their relationship with government. But I do personally agree it might be one of the reasons for the frequent overlap of information that we came across in the action documents. Totally. Yes, I would agree with that.
Okay, and we also had Blurina that had a question. So Blurina, if you want to hit the talk button, please.
Thank you. It's very interesting to see this.
Blurina, we can't hear you very well. Can you try to speak louder, please?
Is it better now?
It's a little bit better, but yes, if you could try to speak as loud as you can.
Okay, I'll do my best. So it is interesting to see the overall assessment of this disconnect between the different sections, because it is a challenge that we often encounter when revising documents, for example, for gender mainstreaming.
Lorena, I can't hear you. I'm really sorry. I'm not going to be able to answer you. Sorry. Can you speak up a little bit, or maybe increase your volume on your mic?
Okay. Is it better now?
Absolutely, yes.
Right, excellent. So I was saying that this disconnect that you have shown us between the different sections is a problem with which we deal often when reviewing documents for gender mainstreaming, and I'm sure it is the same to one extent or another for environment. I wonder whether this has to do with, because you see a disconnect of following the instructions already in the action document template. For cross-cutting issues, we have most of the instructions concentrated in a specific section. and we often see lack or very weak representation of the cross-cutting issues in the other relevant sections, such as the PPA or stakeholder analysis. And this is a reflection and a question to everyone. Do you think that it is for what regards cross-cutting issues, could we consider whether this disconnect is a matter of the formulation of the template, or it's a matter of the understanding of its reading, and whether it can be addressed with models such as the country X case that you have done? I'm just puzzled, because I thought the problem was, strictly speaking, a problem of cross-cutting issues and not such a generalized issue of this disconnection between the different sections.
Okay, now it's going to be a little bit tricky, Blairine. I know you're posing a question to the colleagues. I'll just come in, and then we are going to pass the mic so they can perhaps answer you in that way. We can't really get a full chat going. But again, yes, when we come to look at cross-cutting issues, which are dealt with in Section 3, one of the findings was that indeed you might have a reference to, we're going to be, gender mainstreaming, environment mainstreaming, RBA mainstreaming, whatever, but that's it. You do not come across it anywhere else in the document, which makes it somewhat dubious and not very credible. If they are going to be mainstreamed, you would assume that that would appear in the context analysis. Somehow there'd be some sort of assessment of the situation and policy assessment. You would also expect to find it in objectives and results. So I totally agree that it's not being carried through. There is very much a sense, and this is a personal opinion, there is very much a sense that the sections are literally being dealt with in an isolated manner. And I think, I don't know, open for discussion, I think what might be going on here is that we have a sort of a checklist culture. So, for gender, you have the gender checklist. For environmental mainstreaming, you have the environmental mainstreaming checklist. So in other words, there is that sort of kind of a tendency to checklist it, to put it in and then just report back without really thinking through, okay, if we're going to mainstream, for example, gender in this, is to cross-cut it, so it should be coming right through. That's my impression after reading through several of these, and we will be looking at that when we look at the data for Section 3. But allow me to pass the parole to one of the colleagues. I'll come out.
Yes, if I know that right now there's Eric that had raised his hand, but if there's anyone that would like to speak to this specific question, can you raise your hand? The little icon with the hand that Fouad mentioned under the participant in the participants box. So I don't see anyone right now. There's Eric and Tony. So maybe Eric, would you like to speak now? Just click on your talk button.
Yes. Hello, Lucy. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. So my question actually is very similar to the one that was just mentioned by Belina. That Karen.
You speak up a little bit. Sorry. Who is it? This is Eric. Can you speak up a little bit?
Okay, yes, I was just saying that my question is very similar to the last speaker. If we look at, it seems to be not a very high score that's been got by these action documents. It seems to be a bit disappointing, as Karen said. Is the problem the instructions, and maybe too complicated or too abstract, or too overlapping, as Tony mentioned, or is it the problem that the authors don't have the skills, or perhaps they have the skills, but they're careless, and they don't have the devotion. They maybe have trying to rush it or something like that. What seems to be the common factor behind that, you could say, author's failure? And the reason I want to ask that is because, Chloe and myself and Sarah and Eve, we're trying to do this PPM course, which is to help people to write better action documents. Or at least to do the analysis better. It'd be interesting to see what diagnosis comes out of this. We have the symptoms. What's the core root of the disease?
Okay, will I answer that?
Yeah, you're lost. You're lost, Karen. Ils ont perdu.
Okay, am I here?
Okay.
Am I back?
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
gosh, okay, I don't know where I lost you. Eric, it's probably a mix of elements, of all of the elements you referred to, not fully understanding, not having the time, not being a specialist. Probably all of those factors are contributing to the findings that we came across. However, part of the exercise that we're currently doing, I think, is to incorporate these findings and lessons into our training. So, I mean, I deal with LFA monitoring and evaluation. So we are incorporating these findings, if you like, into the training we're providing. So I think from your perspective as well, the work you're doing with Sarah, etc., I think there's definitely scope for increasing understanding, because I mean they have received the template. Personally, I think the template is well written. It's clear, but you know it's one thing to receive a template, and it's another thing to actually be provided with clear guidance on how to apply it. So I think it's a learning curve. Let's not forget this template is new. It was just brought in 2015. So you know our EU staff are just learning to work with it and have expressed an interest to receive training in it. So I think that's where we can, knowing where the weaknesses are. The whole point of this exercise is not to find weaknesses for the sake of finding weaknesses. It's to look at these action documents and see where are where is the quality falling down, what's not clear. So I would say if 1 or 2 people make a mistake, okay, it's their misunderstanding. But if you've 10 people making the same mistake, then we need to look at it as trainers and say, okay, we need to perhaps focus in on this area to make sure that the message is clearer, because for the time being it would appear that this needs to be reinforced. Okay, I'll pass to somebody else wants to connect.
This is Lucy again. Tony, did you want to say something else? I see your hand is up. Can you press the talk button if you? Nope, Tony is not there, or he doesn't want to speak. Oh, there you are, Tony.
No, I had nothing to add. That flag, that wave was from a previous.
Okay, can you click again on the hand then to make it disappear? And same for Eric. Okay, and what about Sarah? Sarah, you had a comment in the box. Is there anything that you would like to add? If you do, please hit the talk button. Okay, so Sarah, I guess that means you're okay, just to make a point. Okay, great. So maybe we should move on to, okay. Sarah is explaining her point. That's fine. Okay, thank you. So Karen, I think we'll continue, and we'll have another chance to ask questions after the next sections that you're doing. So I'll give it back to you.